As the Matrix continues to demolish itself and collapse, what do you do when the fires of hell come for everything that you love? Recently, I was forced into that situation to really ponder, as I could see from my vantage point up here deep in the mountains of Agua Dulce, and watching on the horizons as the fires around LA raged out of control for a while. Now we're finally in a temporary reprieve as we've received the first decent rain of the winter. You can see the mountains behind me have received their first dusting of snow, which is definitely very good news. But in reflecting along the last couple weeks, the kind of sudden nature and the intensity of it really lit something new inside me and just kind of made me realize really what's happening, that's truly inevitable for all of us. So the first thing is, when the fires started, I was picking up a dog, and it was the middle of the night, and it was the start of the Hearst fire south of Santa Clarita, and I was driving over this overpass, and I could see this snaking line of flame across the entire hill. And it was just quite something to behold, and I just thought to myself, wow, this is probably going to be interesting. And from there, everything started to pick up. The Palisades fire, the Eaton fire, all of them, really continued to rage. And there were two fires in particular, the Lydia fire, and there was one other, I can't remember the name. But, from this hilltop up here in the mountains, on the horizon, we could see a plume of smoke directly behind me, quite off in the distance, and then in this direction off in the distance, there was a 1,000-acre fire with just a massive plume of smoke into the sky. It looked like a nuclear bomb went off. And during all this, we've definitely had people we know out here that have been affected. There was a friend of mine who was in Topanga Canyon, and he was looking after a whole number of animals, a lot of dogs and cats. And he was eating down by the PCH, and the fire was in the Palisades, and all of a sudden it wasn't. All of a sudden the Santa Ana winds, the winds from Satan, just picked up, and these fires just started skipping in a really crazy manner. The winds out here, when it's bad, are really one of the worst parts. It's really, really, really crazy wind. And so he was eating at the bottom of the PCH, and all of a sudden the fire hopped a canyon, and Topanga Canyon just started to go crazy. So he literally ran up the hill, unlocked the kennels, and all his dogs, he had I think 9 dogs at the time, and they all ran down the hill together. And he let the cats out. The cats, they're not coordinated enough to run down with him, and he was hoping that they would go to the water nearby it to escape the flames that were literally coming in. The smoke, the flames were closing in on him. And thankfully, he and the dogs made it out, but unfortunately, when he went back, about a week later, once he was able to get past all the police lines and everything into the place he was living, it was just all burnt to ash and a crisp. And all he could find was one of the charred remains of one of the cats, unfortunately. So, I was faced with a situation where one of the fires that popped up behind the hill, right here, it was far enough away where we could see good distance on it, but as the smoke started at the beginning of the fire, it was like 5 acres, and all of a sudden it turned to 50, all of a sudden it turned to 100, and that was within the span of about 30 minutes. And I was off the mountain running errands, and I get a panicked call that there's this fire right behind our hill that's starting to grow. And at that time, with the winds the way they were, that thing could have hopped fairly easily in our direction if it turned badly. Thank God it didn't, thank Christ. And instead, we've just got a view up here of the world burning. And especially off in the distance this way, the most recent fire, there was about 1,000 acres, a couple thousand in Castaic that went up. And man, it just looked like a nuclear bomb went off in the distance. I mean, just a huge, almost not really a mushroom, but it was just crazy plume of smoke into the sky. And this is not an accident. You know, there's a lot of these natural disasters going on. You know, you have hurricanes in some places, we have fires here, got earthquakes, you have all kinds of different things. But what we're seeing is a controlled collapse and destruction of the matrix. It's an inevitability with the ending of this age. And you know, there's a math behind it, because even with all the certain crazy events recently, they say, oh, this was like a very slim chance of happening. It's a massive outlier, you know. But the reality is that there's something called tail risk when it comes to statistics. And so if you look at the bell curve and the probability of all these different horrible events happening, most things fall in the middle, and they're, you know, pretty expected. But at the end of the bell curve, you have this little tail here where on either side where things just get wild, basically. And we're entering a time where no matter where you are, we're going to be experiencing that. There's going to be crazy things, you know, from a natural disaster standpoint. And a lot of it really, maybe it's unnatural, depending on how you look at it. I mean, it's just the world caving in on itself. And so how do you prepare when there's a fire bearing down, about to just burn everything up to a crisp and burn everything that you care about alive? What do you do? You know, and it was a question that I was faced with, and I'm up here, you know, in the mountains, particularly to support the Descendants of Wolves Animal Sanctuary, which I'll be talking about more soon in future videos. And we, at the time, had 10 dogs on the mountain with us. And so it was really a challenge to try to make an emergency plan on how to figure out, you know, how to coordinate getting all these dogs off the property, you know, should a fire actually close in on our location. Now, thankfully, we didn't have to evacuate. We were just outside of one of the evacuation zones. But it was definitely a very harsh and brutal reminder of, you know, what's happening already as we speak, but also what's about to come, because this is just the start. And so for everyone watching this, I would advise you to hunker down, because winter is coming. You know, I believe I've said that before, but these things we're seeing are not accidents. You know, it's a controlled, coordinated series of events. There's many pieces of data I could point to, but really that's the way I see it. And you know, there have to be plans that you have in place to protect yourself and the ones and everything that you love. And it's not just in a physical manner, you know, it's a spiritual manner, because sometimes all we can do is pray. I mean, when fire is bearing down on you, you know, that's one of the craziest natural disasters that I've witnessed firsthand, because of just the sheer power, force, and really the unstoppable nature of it. I mean, when there's fire in a normal condition, it's one thing. Like right now, it's quite quiet up here. But the winds we get out here were hurricane-force winds at the time. And, I mean, maybe you've seen some of the videos. It was just truly a firestorm with just winds whipping across hillsides in the blink of an eye. And I was just, you know, as I was driving back from errands in a panicked manner, I was just imagining, like, what I would have to do to just drive, you know, with a bunch of dogs in my truck, like, as fire closed in on us. I mean, because that's what literally happened to people that I know. And ultimately, you know, amidst all that, there's a certain feeling of helplessness. But also, you know, at times like that, I just pray. And I know that if you have faith, you know, all things, when you have the right faith and the right belief, they can be overcome. And I do believe that when it comes to, from a more pragmatic standpoint, you know, if you're affected by any of these kinds of disasters, a private trust is going to be one of the few things that stands in between you and a whole bunch of external tail risks that are going to come for you, your family, your assets. Even, you know, with these fires and the aftermath, a lot of people are going to have a rude awakening when it comes to insurance, when it comes to, you know, even the way they zone LA County and the way, like, things are going to be divvied up after all the ash is settled and FEMA comes in and clears everything up. FEMA is one of these agencies that has the power of eminent domain. And so if you don't know what that is, it's basically the government comes in and, under their martial law, maritime war tactic bullshit, they just come in and they start doing whatever the fuck they want. And they can seize land under eminent domain for public safety and redistribution. And in my hunch is that's one of the things that's going to come for some of these disaster-ridden areas when they start rezoning and kind of replotting it out and selling it, allow the lots off to the big, vultures waiting to pounce on it. I mean, we know BlackRock's right there waiting. We know all these big conglomerates are waiting. They're already talking about rezoning a lot of these residential neighborhoods to multifamily just to, get these big, ugly, toxic things up where they can rent them out, farm them out to all the slaves. So that's coming, and that's partly probably why those events, at least here, happen in the first place. And wherever you are, those same things are coming. We've seen floods, we've seen hurricanes, we've seen fires, but again, these are just the start, and then it's a pattern, and then the government comes in and they clean up the mess with their pathetic, $770 checks. Meanwhile, they're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, at least they were, and I don't know if that's still going on, but anyway, it's all, a bunch of nonsense unless you have the tools to protect yourself. And that means, both in a tangible sense for your actual assets, your property, your own body, your children, but also in a spiritual sense. And so if you haven't placed your assets in a private trust where FEMA or the IRS or the government or these kinds of predatory agencies and vultures can't get to you, then you need to really seriously consider doing that, because after the disaster comes, it's too late. I mean, a lot of things are going to be really beyond control at that point. But once assets are behind a shield like that, you have much more power in just handling any kind of situation in the aftermath of it. Much more negotiating power, much more leverage just to, see how it settles. I mean, obviously, for many people, they're going to begin negotiating with insurance companies, which is definitely not going to be fun. But, even from a standpoint of just making sure that your stuff isn't seized forcibly or redistributed, that's a big concern that I have for many people, especially in LA and, these sort of blue control areas where, the government just likes to get their hands very deep into people's pockets, and they're going to do anything that they can to continue that trend. So those little pathetic checks that they're trying to drop are just that's really a very pathetic salve on the massive, gaping fire scars that we're seeing across this land at this moment. So I just wanted to make this quick video and check in. Certain people have asked, why I've been a little bit quiet recently, and there's been a few things going on. That's been one of them. But also I've been working on some projects trying to figure out, how to add more value to everyone in the Bulletproof Retirement community. And so there's definitely a bunch of things coming. I'm out here not just working with animals, but there's also specific medicine work that we're doing. There's certain plants that are very specifically grown in this type of climate out here. And so we're looking to, do work with that and help a lot of people that are very sick. Because one of the things I realized in doing this work with private trusts is that people are dealing with such viscerally hard things in their bodies and in their life that they think a trust is this lofty thing that, only rich people do that. It's like some lofty thing that's very unattainable that, maybe one day I'll get to it. There's a real lack of concern about that, a real complacency that I see with many people I talk to. But the reality is everyone who's watching this, you already use a trust. You just probably are using one given to you by the government, which is just a terrible situation to be in. So really, the basic 101 education from the time we grew up should be Trust 101. How do you get your shit locked down where you're protected in a way? And that should be one of the first things that you wake up in the morning thinking about, you know? Like that should be like right after eating. Um, but instead, it's just this thing that, oh, one day I'll get to it, you know? Well, I mean, hopefully you get to it before the fires of hell come for you and what you love. But for those of you who want to be proactive, jump in the Bulletproof Retirement community. There's many success stories. We literally have hundreds of people who've successfully done this trust in there. We're one of the largest groups of private trustees, probably, you know, in the world even, but definitely in the United States. And so there's going to be a lot of people in there to bounce ideas off of and just save you a lot of time, because people are wasting time doing their research, looking at all kinds of BS, when you could just follow the exact path that many other people are doing, and it'll just reduce stress massively as you go down that route. The Matrix wants you to believe that you're good where you are. You should just depend on lawyers, accountants, the government. But we're seeing time and time again in these controlled patterns how that's not working out well for people.